Hey, what's good with the YouTube? This is your boy Rojo. This is the Rojo Room, man. And I just got a quick minute right now to go ahead and release a little bit of news. 2 days ago in New Folsom, the white dudes removed one of their own, and it resulted in him. He passed away. So apparently there was two very large knives found at the scene, and from all accounts, what was said is it was pretty gruesome. Now, I haven't been able to find any news releases or anything about this at this time, CDCR or, general media like the news or anything like that. So I was unable to get the names because this came from a different group other than the whites, but, it definitely happened, multiple, confirmations, man. But prison's a dangerous place, man. Them level 4s ain't no joke. And ever since the end of hostilities, it was very rare back in the 90s or whatever for there to even be a murder. You know what I mean? There's a lot of slashing, some stabbings and stuff, but nobody ever passed away. It's very common now that when something goes down, that the end result is the victim doesn't make it. And there's a few reasons why. One, all the big homies from every group are out on these main lines now, these level 4s, level 3s and stuff. And all of these groups essentially have a unwritten rule, whereas when you go after somebody, your ultimate goal is to make sure they're no longer around. You know what I mean? So a lot of the supporters, okay, when all these groups were validated, they'd be, the big homies from down south, the big homies from up north, while they were all slammed down in places like Pelican Bay and Corcoran and what have you, a lot of their associates, underlings, people of that nature weren't necessarily holding themselves to that type of a standard. That's why they called it a removal. You know what I mean? A removal is just basically making sure they are taken away from their current housing situation and so on and so forth. Then they started going to cutting the face, as a sign anywhere they go, hey, this dude's had his face cut. They automatically pretty much know what time it is with that individual. But the thing is with, any of the three main organized groups, when they go after somebody, they're going all the way. You know what I'm saying? It's not a removal, it's not none of this. And the reason is, if you're willing to sacrifice this type of manpower to get rid of an individual, they may as well go. And a lot of, for the longest time, at least as far as the Northerners went, they would usually use somebody who was kind of in trouble. You know what I mean? That had to do something to kind of clean up a wreck they had gotten themselves into, or as a disciplinary measure. They would be what was called frontline status. So that means anybody who had to go, they'd be the person that had to do it. And at times where there was nobody in trouble, that didn't have frontline status or whatnot, it was kind of a volunteer basis. And there's really never a shortage of volunteers because everybody's looking to be that person that gains that type of respect. Like, hey, I did this pegada. I'm really about that action. I'm dedicated, and I'm willing to go all the way for my beliefs. But the whole attitude, during the time when people were locked down in the SHU programs, it changed a little bit. People were still taking care of their business. They were still checking paperwork. They were still getting rid of trash. You know what I mean? But for the longest time, it was acceptable to use razor blades to do that type of thing. And when I joined the NF, I was straight told they don't ever want to hear about me doing anything or me authorizing anything that involved a razor blade. It was to be steel. and it was real specific in my direction. 6 inches usable steel. That's what they requested. That was the common understanding in C12, where I was with Tibbs and DC and Corny. And you guys already know who them individuals are and their status, right? So, anytime nowadays where there's going to be a removal, we won't say anytime because freak things happen, but 95% plus of the times when people get removed nowadays, it's going to be within their own group faction. You know what I mean? And with these big homies from all these groups being let out of the shoe, they've reincorporated their core belief as to when somebody's got to go, they really got to go. There's not no beat you up, there's not no cut your face, there's not no tomahawk or crossbow or spear or, boiling water. There's none of that, man. Their goal when they do a removal is to end that person's life. And there's many reasons behind that, man. One, the loss of manpower. Obviously, that person is going to get a life sentence for an in-house 187. For two, the whole institution's going to go on lockdown. And that's going to prohibit any kind of money making. Well, it's going to reduce the amount of money making and, the general order of operations throughout your day, which, as Northerners, they're very serious to, the group's overall dynamics. You know what I mean? Every day there's things going on, things that need to be done, expectations, etc., that that will be majorly, prohibited during lockdowns. For three, it's going to bring extreme scrutiny to your particular group. So no matter what group does this killing, they're going to be hot for quite some time. Unless the victim in the case is somebody that the administration just happens to really, really hate or what have you, then they might not trip. So there's lots of reasons, that these individuals, of these groups choose to remove somebody in the ultimate fashion, because it brings it alters prison temporarily, man, going on lockdown. The fortunate thing with the end of hostilities is that the administration and everybody knows that all these removals are done by their own groups. So they know that it's an isolated incident and there's no danger. They don't need to lock down the institution because there's not going to be, retaliations and, runbacks or anything of that nature. It's going to be a one-shot deal. They accomplish what they need to accomplish. Nothing else is going to go down. We can resume program. And a lot of times if one group does something, it's not even necessarily going to affect the other groups, like whereas in the past, if there was war, if, say, for example, the gentleman from down south and the African brothers had an issue, man, every single Sereno, every single black, even if it was just against the Crips, might be locked down for an indeterminate amount of time. Man, nowadays when it's in-house, man, program goes back to normal. If the Serenos do an incident, they might get put on lockdown for a minute. The other groups are going to continue programming more often than not. I want to say a special shout out to both Boxer as well as my homie Gunner. They're both a little bit under the weather right now. Both are in the process of making a recovery, and they will be back in action, hopefully within the next couple of days, man. They both got a little bit ill, and I've talked to both of them, and they should be fine. They should be back within a day or two, couple of days, week tops. But they're on the mend. They're not gonna die or nothing, contrary to all the things being said out there, man. I spoke to both of them. They are gonna be back. So keep them in your thoughts. They both got pretty ill though, nonetheless. It's not like they got, what do they call that stuff? The bubonic plague, or what was that stuff coming out of Africa for a while, man? That one disease that was killing everybody. I don't remember, but they're fine. Little illness, they're good. I just wanted to let you guys know that. For those of you who are wondering, I know, when you ain't seen somebody in quite a minute, it becomes quite obvious that there's something going on, and they're both getting healthy right now. So, um, there was something else I wanted to touch on, but I didn't. It's lost on me right now, man. Unfortunately, I had one more point, man, but I rambled on a little bit about that new Folsom incident. So, yeah, but hey, man, I've been talking to an individual that's locked down on a 50-50 yard, and I'm gonna have some amazing stories for you, and I know they're all accurate. It's somebody from my city, that I've known a long time, that has held a lot of positions of authority, and he wouldn't lie to me at all. So he's got some really remarkable stories about a lot of the things that are going on these 50-50 yards right now, man. Like, people from my era and in the eras before me, it's almost impossible to fathom the things that are happening. And I'll give you a brief summary, man. There's a lot of individuals say, okay, let's say we're at I don't want to say what yard he's on because I don't want to narrow it down, but let's say we're on a 50-50 yard, and usually one group on that yard or multiple groups won't be active, like as far as full GP. They'll be, basically ostracized from their group, but they're not all the way SNY. Well, the place he's at, it's a non-designated yard, and half the people there are basically people who would be on the BNL. The other half of the people there are fully functioning as far as the Northerners go. Wow, that blows my mind. And it's definitely legit. I know the people who are there, and I find it really interesting that the way things are going nowadays. Ever since these end of hostilities, man, things have gotten real weird, man. And then, throw in the state and the feds thing, and the quiet storm and power struggles, and man, if I ended up in prison right now, I wouldn't know what in the hell was going on. I'd be at a complete loss, because the way things are right now really goes against everything you're ever taught. And I'm not saying that in a negative fashion at all, because one of the main things as a Northerner you are taught, as a bro back in the days, is advancement demands change, and things are changing. The end of hostilities was great. The ability to intermingle with people who would be at once considered mortal enemies, man, I think it's dope. I think it's great for the North and the South, and I wish the Bulldogs were part of that as well. But man, times are so weird, bro. I mean, you got high-ranking individuals at certain institutions that are sharing the yard with people on the BNL. And that's amazing to me, man. Before that would be, and I'm not saying that in this situation, man, because things have been revised and updated, and I'm not in no way insinuating anybody of this, but that would be considered all bad. They would use a bad word for that, and I don't want to even say the word. You guys know what it is, because it doesn't apply to this situation, because times have changed. But I can't even imagine being in prison nowadays. I'd be lost. I mean, I've told you guys in the past how, when I came back to Tracy after being out of prison for 8 years, I wasn't familiar with Northern Riders, and, sensitive needs. I knew they housed DOs in Mule Creek, but, the extent of everything was just mind-boggling to me, man. And now it's so complex. Every yard is different, man. And if you've been out of the prison system for a long time and came back, boy, you'd be lost, bro. You'd be like, this ain't right, I should take off. Oh, but them guys are doing it, and those guys, man, it's a cold world, man. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling, man, but just a brief summary, man. A white inmate was taken out in New Folsom 2 days ago by his own people. Say 2 extremely large pieces were found at the scene, and it was really a gruesome hit. And Boxer, Paradigm Media News, and Gunner, everybody knows Gunner's Collective, Gunner's Profiles. They've both been under the weather for a minute, but they're both fully recovering, and they'll both be back at you in a few days. So shout out to both of them gentlemen. Let's wish him a speedy recovery. This is your boy Rojo. This is the motherfucking Rojo Room, and I'm out.